This is a historic day for the Tibetans. His Holiness the Dalai Lama devolves all his political powers to an elected leadership. A time for celebrations culminating the Tibetan leader's long-term efforts to introduce his people to a democratic system of governance. However, the roots of this celebration lie in a tragedy that struck Tibet, an independent and peace-abiding land. As the invading People's Liberation Army advanced westward, trampling upon the freedom of Tibetans, the Dalai Lama, then just 25 years old, is forced to flee Lhasa. Disguised as a common soldier, the young Dalai Lama began the long and dangerous escape over the Himalayas on the night of March 17, 1959.
The Dalai Lama makes his first public appearance since his escape from Tibet. The Dalai Lama issues a statement condemning Beijing for breaking promises to respect Tibetan rights. In Tezpur, a tea-growing center of North
The Tibetan government is intact.
Thus begins the story of rebuilding a lost nation. The Dalai Lama's vision for an exiled society then starts to unfold in April 1960 at his new headquarters, Dharamshala, an abandoned British hill station in the northwest Indian Himalayas. These newly arrived refugees in an alien environment were suffering from trauma, malnutrition, and a sense of existential crisis after fleeing their homes in fear, losing their farms, livestock, family, and freedom. The bright and uniting hope came from the leadership and clear-sightedness shown by the youthful Dalai Lama. These first Tibetan refugees slowly began to stand on their own feet as they learned to wield sledgehammers, shovels, and ignite dynamite, blasting through the daunting and hostile Himalayan mountains to build strategic border roads for India. The Dalai Lama's immediate concern was the physical well-being and the future of his people, now refugees, particularly the children. Tuberculosis and other contagious diseases, compounded by hard labor, led to the death of many Tibetan refugees in the early years. Now shouldering the responsibility of not just rehabilitating the mounting number of refugees, but also keeping the Tibet issue alive. His early efforts to stop repression inside Tibet resulted in 3 UN resolutions between 1959 and 1965. The circumstances led the Dalai Lama to approach Prime Minister Nehru for assistance in providing permanent rehabilitation to his people. With help from the Indian government, separate schools, monasteries, medical institutions, cultural institutes, and settlements were gradually established so that the Tibetans could keep alive and preserve their religion, culture, and unique identity. For 20 years, Tibet itself remained cut off from the outside world as the Cultural Revolution saw the systematic destruction of Tibet's religion and culture. Meanwhile, Chairman Mao's death in 1976 and the end of the Cultural Revolution resulted in Tibet opening to the outside world. This led to the first direct contact between Beijing and Dharamsala since 1959. Then began the visits of the Tibetan fact-finding delegations to study the situation in China and their homeland. Soon after the Dalai Lama presented his 5-point peace plan for future Tibet to the Human Rights Caucus of the American Congress in 1987, the world was watching harrowing images of major protests in Lhasa, smuggled out by foreign tourists. In retaliation, China cracked down heavily on the demonstrators. A year later, the Dalai Lama presented his Strasbourg proposal to the European Union, which became the basis for today's middle way approach, a strategic policy seeking genuine autonomy for Tibet within the framework of the People's Republic of China.
It's a human problem through discussion, trying to solve through discussion, through mutual understanding.
In recognition of his unflinching efforts to promote peace and reconciliation, the Dalai Lama was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989. The Tibetan Parliament in exile unanimously adopted the middle way approach as the official policy of the Central Tibetan Administration, the CTA, in 1999. Today, the exiled Tibetan administration functions upon the 3 pillars of democracy: the Kashag, or cabinet headed by the president, the Tibetan Parliament in exile, and the Tibetan Supreme Justice Commission. Autonomous bodies such as the Tibetan Public Service Commission, the Tibetan Election Commission, and the Office of the Auditor General perform their duties independently. The CTA today oversees about 100 schools, 7 hospitals, 43 clinics, and 71 settlements across India, Nepal, and Bhutan. It is also represented by foreign missions in 12 countries. Close to 200,000 Tibetans in India, Nepal, Bhutan, and those settled in North America, Europe, and Australia pay an annual contribution to aid their government, the Central Tibetan Administration.
롱압 쪽이 채식과래였어. 채식이 시대인데 가르쳐나 베베기 미리 송겹치야 돼. 미리 오지. 근데 미리 오 송겹치라 되고 한다. 기 소소 벽에래. 최직슝. 되게 코랑은 주기니 민념 공배체 백해 좀 물어봐. 나디 더 롱아 능글라 우메 람시샤브 토네 맹된 수랑종 라트웨드 쪼레스. 딜란 벽에 되면 용국어래. 아니 야나 슝기 꾸잡다 콘서트 꾸잡 파르라 가면난 거야 신의 캐시다 이게 캐시제스